A lot of times when someone has a DUI and they're a new client, they're coming in to see us or they've hired us, they ask me, what can I do? What homework can I do? How can I be proactive to work on my case? And there's really a number of things that you can do to help us, whether you hire us or whichever attorney you ultimately hire. First of all, I think it's very valuable to sit down as soon after the incident as possible and write out a narrative of everything that happened that day. Everything really from the time that you woke up. What did you eat that day? What time did you eat? Because all of this can be significant for us. When did you start drinking? Where were you drinking? Who were you with? How many drinks did you have? What were the drinks? What was in them? When did you stop drinking? So everything that happened leading up to the time that you got pulled over or encountered the police. Then we want you to continue in the narrative and describe what happened once you had this contact with the police. So what field sobriety test did they have you do? What do you remember about it? What sort of things did the police tell you? Did they say, well, I'm not sure if you're intoxicated, but just to be safe, I want to bring you into the station to take another test? We want to know everything that the police told you, everything that you said to the police, everything that occurred up until the time that you took the blood test or breath test and were booked and were either released or brought into the jail. Now, I have clients write out this story, and sometimes it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pages long, single space, typed. And that's great because it's full of details that may ultimately prove very useful in constructing your defense, sometimes in ways that you may not realize. Sometimes there's certain facts that are very significant to your case that you may not realize at the time the importance of it, but ultimately you will and we will once we put the case together. And the reason I like to have you do this right after the incident is because it's fresh in your mind. And what I find is that when I sit down with clients a week after the DUI, or 2 weeks after, or a month or 2 months, memories become more and more faded, and details become more and more vague, and you simply can't recall all of the facts the same way. So as soon after the incident, ideally like the very next day or once you're released, I like to have the client sit down and write out this story and give it to me. And that sort of forms the beginning of our putting together of the case, of the defense. Another thing that's very important is if you purchased alcohol at a bar, at a club, at a restaurant, from a liquor store, if you have receipts, I'd like to have those receipts because I'd like to be able to prove exactly when you drank and what time you drank and generally what time you finished drinking. So if you signed a bar tab at a particular time, usually that's good objective evidence, especially if it's with your credit card, of the time that you finished drinking. And in these DUI cases, oftentimes we need to construct a timeline of the drinking pattern, and we need to prove that timeline. And if we have those receipts, that can help us objectively prove when you drank, how much you drank, and how it fits into the timeline. Another thing that's very useful in these DUI cases is to talk to your, what I call sobriety witnesses. People who you were with, ideally people who were with you in the car when you got pulled over is the best. But if no one was in the car with you, then maybe there were some people, maybe you just left a restaurant or a bar and there were people who you were hanging out with and they saw you maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes before you got pulled over. And if these people can testify, can give a statement and can testify that you appeared to be sober, then that can be very instrumental in your defense. For example, I had a DUI case recently. It was a case that went to trial, in fact, and the officers tried to paint the client as being very intoxicated, and the client was with a coworker in the car when she got pulled over, and the coworker testified and said, listen, I was with her the whole evening, and she was not intoxicated at all. She was driving just fine, she was coherent, she was stable on her feet. There was nothing about her behavior to suggest that she was drunk. And the witness said, look, I value my life. So if I thought she was drunk, I would not have gotten in the car with her, and I would not have let her drive. But it was clear to me that she was just fine. That client was ultimately acquitted. I think in large part due to that sobriety witness. So if you have sobriety witnesses who are with you in the car, are with you soon before you got pulled over, who can testify to your sobriety, then I want you to identify those people. We want their names, we want their phone numbers, we want their addresses so we can contact them. And we'd like you to contact them and say, hey, can you write a written statement for me? Just a written statement explaining when you were with me, what you observed, the time that you were with me, and the fact that I appear to be sober. So collecting those statements proactively can be very useful in your defense. The last thing that can be very useful for you to do proactively is to go to some AA meetings. This is especially true if you had a really high BAC. If you had a 0.15, 0.18, 0.20 BAC, then the court's going to look at that. They're going to think that you're an alcoholic. Now, you may or may not have a drinking problem. It may be that you were just a little bit tipsy, a little bit plastered that particular night, but it's not an ongoing problem. Or you may have a drinking problem. But if it's a high BAC, prosecutors and judges will look at that and they will assume that there's a drinking problem there, that there may be alcoholism. So if you go to some AA meetings on your own initiative, even before the court orders you to, and we can bring proof of that to the judge and to the prosecutor, that can be very useful. Now, if you do decide to attend some AA meetings, what I would suggest is bring an attendance sheet. If you don't have one of these, call our office. We can email you one. We have them on hand. And what you do is you have somebody at the meeting who's designated will sign off that you attended. They'll sign off for each meeting that you attend. You'll collect that, give it to us, and when we go to court, we'll be able to present that to the court, and that can be very useful.